is widely used in schools to evaluate teachers, right? And now this can make some people uncomfortable because who's evaluating me and why? Think of this more as a personal Pro-D thing that you would do with professional humility. Oh, let's do this as an experiment to see how I do on the TPRA. Every summer for the last 3 years, I'm an assistant limited duty professor at the University of Western Ontario, and I teach the 8th and final course in the Masters of Professional Education, ABA in schools. And this is actually something that we talk about for people getting their Masters in Professional Education, is using the TPRA. So there's lots of people in Ontario doing this. So let me just read the first part of the abstract here, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So the purpose of this paper is to introduce the teacher performance rate and accuracy scale, which is a method of direct teacher observation used in the teacher evaluation and training component of the comprehensive application of behavior analysis to schooling, the CABA school. The teacher performance rate and accuracy scale builds on the concept of academic engaged time, the LEARN unit, a measure frequently employed during eco-behavioral assessment by counting the presence or absence of LEARN units, which is the interlocking 3-term contingencies for both students and teachers during instruction, right? It's that dance. It takes 2 to tango in the LEARN unit. So this is what the TPRA looks like. You have it in your handout, but it's nice and clear there. So this is completed data over 10 teaching trials. And what you see is the teacher's instruction, that nice clear instruction, what the student did as a result, and what the teacher did as a consequence. And so if we just look at the first half of this, you'll see the teacher gave an antecedent, the student did not respond correctly, and the teacher issued error correction. That's what the C stands for, which is what the teacher should do when there's an error. Then the teacher issued the instruction again, the student also made a mistake, another error correction. The third teaching interaction, the teacher issued the instruction, the student did the right thing, and the teacher reinforced the right thing, gave the appropriate programmed consequence. Right? And then that continues on where you can see the teacher gave the instruction, with one exception, the student was correct, and the teacher either gave reinforcement to show them that they were right or error correction if they were wrong. And then you can quantify the teaching interaction at the bottom. So if you look down here, right, 9 out of 10 antecedents, wherever there's a circle, it means the teacher did something that wasn't totally right. They made a mistake. Maybe it was a slow antecedent or an unclear instruction. That's a mistake. So this analysis shows that the teacher was 90% correct in delivering LEARN units. And looking at the consequences of the teacher, there's one response here, reinforcement circled, meaning that the teacher forgot to acknowledge the correct response, didn't reinforce it. And that is not a clean LEARN unit. So that's a teacher error. And so the teacher essentially was 90% correct in delivering the antecedents and 90% correct in delivering the appropriate consequences to close the LEARN unit. And as a result, the student was 70% correct. So you can see this relationship between teachers implementing the teaching correctly and the response rate on the students. So I know all of you are just thrilled about this idea. Let's go home and evaluate my teaching. Right? Probably don't have the time, necessarily the inclination to do that. But you can use this in a variety of settings. So I know that some folks I work with do this in the Surrey School District with the special education assistants with full consent and approval from all parties involved. Someone will go in for a particular strategy in the IEP, and this is how you're supposed to do it. And I'm going to take some of this TPRA data to just look at, are you implementing it correctly? What's the student doing? Are you consequating it correctly? And giving you feedback, right? This is part of that 4-part behavioral skills training, where part 3 was you do, and then you get feedback in part 4, right? So this can be integrated beautifully into behavioral skills training. And this is done with professional humility, recognizing I'm not doing it perfectly. I might have a lot of experience. That doesn't mean I'm still doing it perfectly all the time. So that's one-on-one. This can be used with whole class teaching, right? This would require a teacher to consent and approve that, sure, as I'm delivering a lesson to the class, I've got my confederate here, maybe my colleague, teacher, what have you, who's gonna do TPRA analysis and give me some feedback, right? Were you delivering your social studies lesson clearly to the grade 6 class, or your algebra lesson clearly to the grade 8 class, right? Were you acknowledging when they got it right, or doing effective error correction when they got it wrong? Right? This can be done for any teacher at any point, right? You could use this for someone who's training a behavior interventionist or a special education assistant. It just requires that humility and that willingness to recognize that I can always benefit from feedback, right? We often talk about you should videotape yourself and watch yourself. And it's a horrible experience because you see all the mistakes you make when you watch yourself, right? You see the repetitive phrases that you say. It reminds me of a workshop I went to back in the 90s in Winnipeg by Dr. John Mckenna. And Dr. John Mckenna is a behavior analyst who's been around since he was one of Lovas's research assistants. He's a pioneer in the field of behavioral intervention for autism. And he was talking about working with Dr. Lovas and doing ABA therapy with kids with autism. And he had this hotel ballroom packed with 300 or more people in the aisles. And he's sitting up there as this guru of ABA back when it was just emerging. And he's saying something to the effect of, there's 34 things that are critically important that you're doing right every moment when you're working with a kid with autism. To have really clean, effective teaching, there's 34 things that you must be doing correctly. Do you want to know what they are? And everyone's hanging on his every word. Yes, tell us. And his response was, there's 34 of them. I can't remember them all. And so here's the expert saying, I can't remember everything I'm supposed to be doing right all the time. If I'm not doing it right all the time, take some weight off of yourself, right? Give yourself a break. You're not going to be doing it right all the time. So I've always remembered that. That was a really powerful learning experience for me. And that contributes to our humility. I'm not doing it right all the time. And because I know I'm not doing it right all the time, I should welcome the opportunity, even intermittently, to have a bit of evaluation, some self-evaluation done on myself. I could videotape myself teaching a class and then watch it and do my own TPRA, right? Was I giving clear instructions? Did I say that the best way? Was I acknowledging the students? And how are my students engaged as a result? So I put that out there just as FYI. I think it might be helpful information that some of you might want to take home and play with if you're so inclined. There's some good evidence behind it. It falls philosophically in line with behavior analysis. And it underscores the importance of the learn unit as our analysis, our analytic unit of education. So, school teachers and behavior analysts, right? I said this is our kumbaya group. We have more in common than you think, right? It's not, well, I'm a teacher, special education teacher, SEA, I'm gonna go learn about this other thing. I hope you're seeing that there's a huge amount of overlap and congruity between education and behavior analysis. So I'm gonna show you two definitions and kind of draw them together. So the definition of ABA from the textbook that we use in our ABA courses. Applied behavior analysis is the process of systematically applying interventions based upon the principles of learning theory to improve socially significant behaviors to a meaningful degree, and to demonstrate that the interventions employed are responsible for the improvement of behavior. Right? That last bit, to demonstrate the interventions are responsible, that's why we're so big on taking data, because the data will show that the behavior changes as a result of what we did. Right? We can take responsibility for it, and if it's not working, we can make changes accordingly. Right? So that's a textbook definition of applied behavior analysis. And socially significant, one of the beautiful things about applied behavior analysis is there's not a lot of math involved. Behavior analysts are not big fans of statistics because statistics can be misleading, right? It worked, for 95% of the population. I'm interested in the other 5% of the population. We don't do statistical analysis. Meaningful, socially significant and meaningful behavior change means the teacher says it's better. The parent says our lives are better. Right? There's a meaningful change that you don't need statistics to tell you. We call that clinical significance. Forget statistical significance. Clinical significance means people are saying their lives are better. That's the behavior change that we're working towards. Here's a common definition of teaching, recognizing that you can find many definitions of teaching. Teaching is the process of attending to people's needs, experiences, and feelings, and making specific interventions to help them learn particular things. Right? It's a little less technical, but the core elements are still there, right? Both involve the use of interventions, or strategies, techniques. Both involve student outcomes, which is learning. Right? It's kind of talking about the same thing with different terms, but recognizing that we're really talking about the same thing. Right? We as a behavior analyst, I talk about everything as a behavior, right? Whether you can do algebra or formulate a composition in English, those are behaviors that you do, right? As opposed to cognitivizing it. But they're learning outcomes. They're tangible things that the students do to show that you can evaluate them. And teachers are looking for the same thing. So the goals of teaching and behavior analysis are the same. Our teaching behavior influences the change in the student behavior, and we call that learning. If you're a speech-language pathologist, your objective is behavior change. If you're teaching someone to golf, your objective is behavior change. Anyone who teaches anything to anybody is looking for behavior change. Not knowledge change, because knowledge is something that lives in this mystical space between your ears. But how do you know it's working? Because you see people doing something. My speech therapy is effective because now he's articulating ka and ga sounds, right? He doesn't understand ka and ga, he's doing ka and ga. That's behavior change. I've been effective as a grade 1 teacher because when I started, my students couldn't read, and now they can read. They have reading behavior. right? So we're all on the same page. We're trying to modify behavior. No, don't put it modify behavior, that sounds bad. We're trying to teach new skills and behaviors, right? So we're all on the same page. We're on the same team. An interesting note, the vast majority, the last time I checked, something like 70% of ABA graduate programs are in colleges of education. The vast majority of behavior analysts in British Columbia have master's degrees in education. So behavior analysis and education naturally live together, not two separate things. And that's part of the message today and how we're integrating ABA into schools. But wait, don't you just do discrete trial? Back to that first point that Deborah said is wrong and I said is wrong. Don't you just sit kids at tables and make them do things, all right, and give them tokens and tickles and Skittles? No, that's not all we do. It's not all we should be doing anyway. We have a whole science of addressing human motivation. It's a chapter in our textbooks. Reinforcement, both positive and negative. We've invented it. We are the proponents of positive reinforcement. Shaping behaviors, incremental changes, starting with something small and building it to something bigger. Task analysis and chaining, taking a complicated skill and breaking it down and teaching it back up to the composite. Modeling and imitation, huge research base in teaching imitation skills, which, by the way, are critical and predictors of success for kids with autism. Kids with autism who can imitate well tend to do better in the future. Kids with autism who learn imitation quickly, early in education, it's a prognostic indicator of success in the future. Imitation is really, really important. And we've got the methodologies for teaching imitation, all types of imitation. Discrete trial teaching is on there. Skinner's analysis of verbal behavior, which is an operant psychology interpretation of, in particular, expressive language, recognizing that expressive language isn't one thing, but it is a series of things that are all mutually exclusive. Right? Expressive, just because I can label ball doesn't mean I have all the expressive knowledge around ball, but that's a whole other workshop, I won't go into that. Natural environment teaching, incidental teaching, we do that, not just at a table. Picture exchange communication, did you know that the people who developed that are a husband and wife team? Dr. Andy Bondi, behavior analyst, and his wife Lori Frost, speech language pathologist. All of the instructional techniques for picture exchange are entirely and completely behavior analytic instruction. Peer modeling and tutoring, activity schedules, visual supports, we invented token economies, rate building, just because someone can do something accurately, if they can't do it quickly, that can be a problem. I worked with a kid in grade 2 where when they did mad minutes in grade 2, their basic addition and subtraction, he always was, mad minute, you've got 40 questions, when the timer goes, we see how far you got, and you count and you try and beat your number. He always had 100%. That sounds really impressive. Until you look at the data and see, oh, he only answered 3 questions. All the other kids did 20 to 30 questions, right? So his 100% accuracy is actually a big deficit because he's not doing as many questions as the others. He's not as fast and automatic and fluent. So there's a whole area of behavior analysis addressed to building fluency. Functional assessment, addressing problem behavior, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Antecedent interventions, and then, as I said earlier, generalization and maintenance. If you teach something and it doesn't stick and it doesn't apply in other settings, why did we teach it in the first place? So we always have to have an eye towards maintenance and generalization.